we know that we would have received that a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks tops after this incident. 10 weeks later, we knew that there was no justification they could come up with.
After 2 months of silence, an arrest has now been made in the shooting death of Michael Dean. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Monday evening. I'm Chris Radcliffe.
And I'm Leslie Draffin. Let's get to our top story tonight. Temple police officer Carmen Decruz is charged with manslaughter in connection to the death of Michael Dean.
Dean was shot and killed on December the 2nd during a traffic stop. According to the affidavit, Decruz tried to pull Dean over, but Dean didn't stop immediately. Once Dean did stop his car, Decruz blocked the vehicle and walked up to the passenger side window with his gun drawn. The affidavit says Decruz ordered Dean to turn the car off and hand him the keys. Decruz reached into the car with his left hand to try and grab the keys while pointing the gun with his right hand, finger on the trigger. The affidavit states as Decruz pulled back with the keys, he also pulled back with his other hand, causing the gun to discharge, hitting Dean in the head. Decruz then pulled Dean out of the passenger side window and tried to save him along with other responding officers. So we are asking you this evening, do you agree with Carmen Decruz's manslaughter charge? Let us know what you think on our question of the day. And after Decruz's charges were revealed, the Dean family's attorney, Lee MERRITT, held a press conference outside Temple City Hall this afternoon. 6 News reporter Cole Johnson was there. And Cole, how is the family reacting?
Chris and Leslie, MERRITT says Dean's family is relieved Decruz is facing charges, but they're disappointed with what the charge actually is. As we said, Decruz is facing a manslaughter charge. Manslaughter means there was no intent to kill. MERRITT says there's nothing about the facts released to Dean's family or the public that is consistent with a manslaughter charge. He brought up the fact that Dean was shot in the head and says that shows the intent for bodily harm or death.
We are extremely disappointed in the charges that he's decided to move forward with. We, as a family, as a community, we're calling on the office of Henry Garza and the Bell County District Attorney's Office to up these charges to what are appropriate.
MERRITT says the family will be moving forward with their civil suit and plan to subpoena the dash cam and body cam videos. But MERRITT says that is not in response to these charges. Another main point MERRITT touched on was regarding the transparency of the case. MERRITT says he has never seen so little information released in a shooting prior to an indictment decision. Here's how MERRITT says the family found out about the charges.
They have found out through media sources. Okay. We still haven't had a chance to see the file. You all probably know more about their file than we do at this point. They found out through me. This is the most obscure, the most secret, the most illegitimate investigation I've ever been a part of in my career, and I work cases all over the country.
MERRITT also talked about phrases used like evasion and altercation that were mentioned in 2 reports related to the case. He says they do not justify the use of deadly force. Guys.
All right, thank you so much. Cole Johnson live in the Channel 6 newsroom. Temple Police Chief Jim Tobin answered questions on camera about Dean's case for the first time tonight. Now, Leslie, you were there for about 25 minutes. This press conference went on. What did the chief really have to say? Well,
Chief Tobin answered a lot of our questions, and mostly he centered around what happened the night that Dean died, why the investigation had taken so long, and of course on Officer Decruz. Now, Tobin says Decruz is on paid leave right now, as he's been since the December 2nd shooting. He will stay on paid leave until he's indicted, at which time he'll be placed on unpaid leave. And now that is a requirement by law. Tobin says Temple PD cannot change that. Now, as we mentioned before, the affidavit gives us many new details about what happened the night Dean died. But what I focused on with my questions to Tobin were the actions Decruz took moments before shots were fired. In the affidavit, Decruz approached Dean's car with his gun drawn, finger on the trigger, so I asked Chief Tobin if that was department protocol, and he said no, that would not be the normal protocol. I also asked why the report filed with the Attorney General's office says an altercation led up to Dean's death, but the affidavit didn't say that.
At the time that report was created, and it was December 30th of 2019, prior to us submitting that, we checked with the ranger investigating this, because again, this is their investigation, but it's our responsibility to complete that report. We checked with him and said, this is what we are putting in the narrative. Do you agree with that? And at that time, again, this early investigation, he said yes. So we went with that. So we were going with part of his guidance also.
Now, in the same reports, it said that the information could be changed at a later date, that what you had at the time was what the reports were based on. Do you foresee those reports changing now that we have the affidavit?
Once we get the actual findings of the investigation, to include the affidavit, but there's going to be more details that are not in there. Once we get all of the facts, I do anticipate that report being amended.
Now today, Tobin told us TPD's internal investigation into Dean's death started on December 4th. Although DECRUZ'S service weapon was taken at the scene on December 2nd, the internal investigation is separate from the criminal one, and Tobin expects it to wrap up by the end of the month. At that time, it will be made public. Now, he also talked about DECRUZ as an officer, saying he had been involved in one incident in the past, but was cleared of any wrongdoing.
This officer has not been a problem officer for us, if that's the point you're asking me. He has not been. This has been a very good officer. He's been dedicated for 9 years to this department. 2.5 hours before this incident occurred, he was one of the officers part of the honor guard leading the parade in Temple during the Christmas parade. So he has not been a bad officer. He has been a good officer.
Tobin also talked about why the department had been so tight-lipped after Dean's death. He says it's because they didn't want to give out incorrect information which might impact the investigation. And when I asked if he thought that their lack of information created controversy, he said he thinks it can, but again, that their department policy says if they feel information will impact the case negatively, then they just don't release it.
Okay, to follow up on that, Leslie, you were there this afternoon, so what does the chief say is next for Temple PD at this point?
So Chief Tobin has requested an after-action review of the department's response to the process, which he said is really common in these critical incidents, which he did call this a critical incident. That's going to look at how they performed as an agency during the incident, after the incident, and then look at and see if they need to improve training, safety, service to the community. He did not say when that might be complete.
Right, but it looked like he hoped to wrap up the investigation by the end of February.
Yeah, internal investigation by the end of this month, and then after the internal investigation is when they would look at the after-action report. That doesn't have anything to do with the Texas Rangers investigation into DECRUZ.
Or even this case. It's just how the case was indeed handled.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, now, 6 News legal analyst Liz Mitchell told us today in this case, the charge against Officer DECRUZ, second-degree manslaughter, can come from an accident or even negligence, and oftentimes can be at the hand of someone with no criminal record. Mitchell acknowledged that there could be a civil case here, but said we will need to wait and that would become secondary.
Yes, you often see these sorts of cases resulting in a civil suit as well, but usually the criminal case comes first. The civil courts won't really want to touch this until they know what the criminal case verdict has been.
And in the criminal case, second-degree manslaughter in the state of Texas, which is legally the same thing as second-degree murder, is punishable by 2 to 20 years in prison and up to a $10,000 fine if found guilty.
Now, we also spoke with the City of Temple's mayor, Tim Davis, about the recent developments in this case. He hopes this is the beginning for all parties involved to heal.
You know, it's my hope now that this is the beginning of a time for both the City of Temple, the Dean family, and for Mr. DECRUZ'S family to begin the healing process. At the end of the day, we're all human, and we care for one another.
The comments this afternoon of Tim Davis, Temple's mayor. So let's check back in with our megaphone right now for the results.
Right, so we asked you, do you agree with Carmen Decruz's charge being manslaughter? And 72% of you said no, the other 28% said yes. So you can continue to vote on that. Many of you also left comments on our Facebook today about the case. Dorothy9 says, what justifies manslaughter? It looked like murder to me, but of course we do not have the videos to see what happened. I hate to see Officer DECRUZ go to jail, but carrying a weapon comes with a big responsibility to use it responsibly, protect and serve all races. And Casey Ryan Brooks said evading arrest doesn't equal the death penalty, while Jennifer Anderson added, finally. And again, we will continue bringing you updates on this case on Texas Today, as well as at KCENTV.com.